Hello, everyone, and welcome to Picture This, the ongoing marathon of every Best Picture nominee ever. We are starting our first ever series on Picture This, where we are looking at a actual trilogy in tandem with one another: 2001, 2002, 2003, because there was a little franchise about little guys searching for rings and going on quests and stuff like that. So I only have the book, the Blu-rays at my other apartment, but I have the books here, so I was like, I need to display them somehow. And while I did that, a bunch of other stuff fell over. But here's my co-host, Chad. How you doing, Chad? While I go fix my set, tell everyone what you think of this year in general and how you're doing.
I'm doing great. This year was interesting. Some really good movies came out. I was 11 at the time. I think Dylan was like what, 3 or 4.
Yeah, it'd be
But
three. Yeah, three going on
yeah,
four. Yeah.
so a lot of crazy shit happened this year. A lot of tragedy in the year that we'll
Yes.
get to in a second.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lord of the Rings, it's one of those things that I didn't get into immediately. I got into like kind of way later, but it's grown to be a pretty beloved franchise of mine as well as a lot of people. So this is going to be a really fun franchise, fun like series to cover because we
Yep.
get to definitively say, did the Lord of the Rings, like each film, deserve to be Best Picture every time, or did they get it right this time? Or
Hmm.
we'll find out
Yeah.
between the two of us.
I do want to just bring up those five movies now. A Beautiful Mind, Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Moulin Rouge. Five films that were nominated for Best Picture, but we are also going to leave some space to bring up some honorable mentions a little later on. But first, let's talk about the history of 2001 because, like we both talked about, big year in general for history, and it's important to just kind of contextualize what was going on in the world, of course, with the Oscars because the Oscars happened in 2002, so this is coming off of everything that happened in 2001 in the midst of obviously some tragic events. But Chad, tell us about 2001 in general. Set the scene for us, if you will.
2001 was designated as International Year of Volunteers. We'll find out why in a second. iTunes is launched.
Wow.
Wikipedia is launched.
Oh,
George, yeah, right. We use
the
that all the time.
big staple for our show. Yeah.
Yeah. George W. Bush is sworn in, and then here's the big one. Approximately 2,977 victims are killed or fatally injured in the September 11th attacks at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
This was a big monumental thing that happened here in the United States. Dylan, I'll give you thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very tough thing, and because also, we sometimes forget that like people are still recovering from
Yeah.
wars that happened even in like Vietnam and even World War II. Like these scars don't necessarily go away, and it's still something that I think has kind of changed the world as we see it today, even to this very day. It's not like it was just a big thing in 2001. We'll see the effects of 9/11 and how they've kind of covered not just this year but the next few years after and still are kind of impacting the way we look at media and the stories we tell. Several films have come about because of the events, or some films have aged poorly because of the events, and also just the way we live is just so different compared to then. So it was really a turning point for art as well, and I think we'll see that a lot. Maybe not necessarily with these films because these films were all probably filmed and some released before, but especially
Mhm.
when we look at even just next year and the year after, we're going to be covering some films that maybe had some sort of impact because of what the events that happened. So I think this is a big turning point, and we love to look at the history because it just informs the art, and seeing what art was available as escapism as well is also big because this was a big year even for family films, and we start to see animation really take off over the 90s and again into the 2000s because people were looking for escapes, and that was sometimes the best form of escape. So very, very interesting, all the information, but also very sad. And our hearts do go out for anyone who is still suffering from just the trauma of that. Obviously, everyone, even if you're not directly, if you weren't directly affected, there's a lot of indirect, you know, trauma and tragedy that comes with that as well. So,
A lot of these are like the big moments I feel like in not just our history but the history of the world. Like the entire
right.
world was kind of like affected by something like this because it's such a big tragedy that affected so many people. But yeah, like I was in middle school and had my dad come and like take me out. I didn't know what the heck was going on, and I couldn't even really comprehend it at the time about the like severity of this thing. I was just kind of like, cool, I don't have to be in school anymore.
Right.
Because I was a child.
Yeah, and
And
you
I'm
grew
sure
up
you were.
close to DC, right? If
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and I grew up close in New York,
Yeah.
so it's like kind of like that similar thing of like, this big city so close by. It definitely
Absolutely.
strikes
Yeah.
close to home, even if you're not necessarily in the action of what's going on.
Yeah, like you said, we our hearts go out to everybody who was affected, and but we don't want to, dote on this too long. But yeah, we definitely wanted to touch on it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the 2001 anthrax attacks happened. That was another terrible thing that happened.
Mm.
Publications were sent this crazy anthrax stuff. The war in Afghanistan started because of this, and then also Bush established the Office of Homeland Security.
Hmm.
All of that being said, the iPod is first introduced.
There's no really good way to
Microsoft
segue there. Yeah.
Microsoft releases the Xbox. That's the end
Wow.
of the history. Now I'll get into the birth. I just had one, and Dylan couldn't figure out who it was. It's Billie Eilish.
Oh, Billie Eilish,
Was
an
born in
Oscar winner.
2001.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look how the arc has come for her.
We will
Oscar
not
winner.
speak about No Time to Die on this show, but I
Oh,
kind of
okay.
wish it because it wasn't a Best Picture nominee,
Right.
but I kind of wish it was because I adored that movie and the song is
Yeah.
amazing.
It
Anyways,
was a very good movie. Very good movie. Yeah.
moving on to the deaths. Louis Arquette, the father of Patricia and David Arquette,
Hmm.
and others. Dale Earnhardt, race car driver. Stanley Kramer, director. Joe Ramone, musician. Herbert Ross, who directed The Goodbye Girl and The Turning Point. I mean, I know he
That's right.
died, but it's kind of cool that his
We
name
just talked
comes
about
up.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then George Harrison, the best Beatle. That's all I had.
I I don't know if I agree, but I like that. I'm not disappointed with that opinion either.
I
I
say
I
he's the
I
best
don't.
Beatle because he seemed to be the most like kind-hearted Beatle,
Ah,
and the other ones were a little
right.
bit more
Gotcha. So you're
self-involved, I
speaking more
feel.
from a personality side than
Yeah.
a talent side. Because I was gonna say, "Here Comes the
Yes.
Sun." It's a good tune. So
Yeah.
I honestly I like some good George Harrison. Yeah,
He wrote some of
maybe.
the good
Yeah.
ones, yeah.
I've never thought about my favorite Beatle, and maybe now I have
Oh,
to sit down
think
and
about
think
it, bro.
about it. Yeah. Any albums of the year that you'd like to bring out? Oh, you've got them
Yeah.
all. You've got
Yeah,
them to
I
show.
picked some out. So I had
Okay.
I'll go by it. I had Amnesiac by Radiohead, fantastic album. I love that
Yes.
band. I had White Blood Cells by the White Stripes. Fantastic. Toxicity by System of a Down.
Okay.
Origin of Symmetry by Muse.
Ooh, I like that cover.
Yeah. Discovery by Daft Punk.
Daft Punk. Nice.
And then maybe one of the greatest albums ever made, Is This It by The Strokes.
Wow.
That's not it. I have more.
Okay.
Lateralus by Tool. The Glow Part 2 by The Microphones. Vespertine by Bjork. And The Blueprint by Jay-Z.
Cool. So that's the history of 2001. Now, before we get into the Oscars themselves, we got to talk about all the films that were left on the table. And I'll be honest, this is a big one especially for franchise filmmaking and big studio filmmaking. A lot of huge movies and some big ones for some notable directors out there. So, I have a little bit of a list. I'll go first for this one, just because some of
Okay.
these movies are like my favorite movies of all time. A big year for animation. We'll get into it a little bit when I talk about the history of the Oscars themselves. But Shrek, DreamWorks' first like big smash hit. We have Atlantis: The Lost Empire, not one of Disney's biggest hits, but I think one that is underrated. Osmosis Jones comes out that year. Monsters Inc., a huge one for Pixar as well. Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, a big one for Nickelodeon. Really good animation that year. Also some big ones for some big directors. Some smaller films from some current big directors like Memento for Christopher Nolan. Pretty big film for him in his career that really launched him into what we know now today as like one of the biggest stars working. Ocean's 11, another big monumental one for Steven Soderbergh. The Royal Tenenbaums, a big one for Wes Anderson. Black Hawk Down, another great Ridley Scott film. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, also known as the Philosopher's Stone. I know Chad's a big fan of that one. Mulholland Drive, David Lynch, Donnie Darko, Training Day, Princess Diaries, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, AI, Artificial Intelligence. The first Fast and the Furious movie, I believe, was 2001. Sexy Beast, one of the best Ben Kingsley performances I've ever seen, Bridget Jones's Diary, and A Knight's Tale, and Spy Kids. Wow, this list just goes on and on. Some that not necessarily are the best films, but just also just staples of childhoods and just other directors' filmography. So I wanted to bring those up. Any more that you have to add, Chad?
Yeah, I'm gonna go through my whole list. There'll be some repeats for sure. I was also a child here, so these are a lot of movies, and maybe not a lot of people heard of if they weren't children around this time. So
Right.
here goes. Notable films: Antitrust, Double Take, Save the Last Dance. I love that movie. Hannibal, Saving Silverman, Down to Earth, Recess, School's Out. Another animated you didn't say.
I've never seen it.
See Spot Run, Say It Isn't So, Spy Kids, Joe Dirt, Bridget Jones's Diary, Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, The Mummy Returns, Shrek, Pearl Harbor, Evolution, Dr. Dolittle 2, The Fast and the Furious, AI Artificial Intelligence, Pootie Tang, Legally Blonde, Jurassic Park 3, Wet Hot American Summer, Rush Hour 2, Rat Race, Bubble Boy, Summer Catch, Hardball, Zoolander, hilarious film, Training Day, Joyride, Corky Romano, Halloween Town 2, Kablar's Revenge. Don't sleep on those decoms, people. Ocean's 11, Vanilla Sky, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, Ali, and Black Hawk Down. For Best Picture, I went a little like I put what I thought was on here. So Memento, Ghost World, The Others, Mulholland Drive, Donnie Darko, one of my favorites, Monsters Inc., The Royal Tenenbaums, and I know people might think I'm crazy, but Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, very well made movie.
Not at all. I think honestly, I told you this kind of off camera, but like if I'm looking at my best picture, I think I would put Harry Potter, Monsters Inc., and Shrek, I think confidently in my best picture three as well. Because I know Shrek and Monsters Inc., they're movies for kids and stuff, but like those were some of the most revolutionary animated films of my childhood
True.
and a lot of other people's childhood. And that segues us into the ceremony itself. This is the first year where they introduced the animated feature category because of such a good year for animation, because those movies were so strong. I would put two animated films that I'm very fond of, Shrek and Monsters Inc. in that best picture. I'd also put Harry Potter in there because I think it is one of the most impressive film from
Oh
book
yeah.
adaptations, and it just kind of spawned such a beautiful franchise, and it is really well made. I mean, it just very well
Yeah.
designed, still holds up too, which I think we've even seen with even some of the best films ever made that came out in 2001. The effects, some of them don't hold up. I think Harry Potter, a lot of it does hold up. Maybe not the Troll, which we've also talked about off air, but it's still charming. Like because there's something
yeah.
about the aesthetic of CGI in 2001 that I still really like. So I would definitely put Harry Potter in that 5. I do not disagree with you there, Chad. So moving on now to the ceremony itself. We talked about it. First animated film category. It was between only 3 little films, the 2 behind me here, Shrek and Monsters Inc., and also Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. Interesting 3 there. But
Interesting.
Shrek did win the first ever animated film Oscar, which is very interesting.
Don't you disagree with that, by the way? I think you would have went Monsters Inc.
Oh, I was about to say I would have gone Monsters Inc., but I still love Shrek, and I honestly think Shrek is just such a great idea. Both those films are just so creative and interesting. I wish we could go in depth talking about them, and maybe when we're done with all the Best Picture years, maybe we go back and watch all the animated features nominees. I don't know. Maybe that's something to keep on the back burner. Because picture this, we don't want it to end, and it will eventually have to once we run out of years to do normally.
It might have to do like a once a year type of thing because I don't think the Oscars is going to end. So
right, exactly. So we might need to fill the other months with maybe some animated feature or international feature, even, like, who knows. That's something to think about maybe in like 10 years, but but yeah, like I really do think it's such a good battle because they're both such original films with such great characters that we still talk about today. Shrek and Donkey, Mike and Sully, like those are the big characters. But Shrek did win the first ever, which is what I was about to say. It was interesting because Pixar kind of then got the trend of winning a lot. Like it won with Finding Nemo and Incredibles and Toy Story 3 and Up and WALL-E and Ratatouille. Like it won so many from that decade, but Shrek was the first. So you got to give it to DreamWorks for that. And I do believe if they had done it in 1998, DreamWorks would have also won with Prince of Egypt. So DreamWorks was really also at a peak, I think, too, even though we like to think of Pixar as the GOAT, which I still believe it is. But I think DreamWorks, does deserve some credit also. Another huge stat for this year was that this was the first year ever where a Black woman won for Best Actress, which was huge. Halle Berry won for Monsters Ball, and it was the first time ever where Best Actor and Best Actress were both people of color. Denzel Washington and Halle Berry both won that year. Denzel for Training Day. So that was just a huge thing, just to see both Denzel Washington and Halle Berry winning. after years and years of people judging and we talked about Gone with the Wind. Hattie McDaniel had to literally sit outside the auditorium and was brought in when her award was presented
Right.
to see how much time had changed 70 years later, to see now Denzel and Halle Berry both winning the two biggest awards of the night for actors. It's really, really great to see.
Denzel is masterful in that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I love his
Yes.
performance in that
Yes.
movie.
Another little fact, this is the last fact I have, is that this was the second time ever that two actresses were nominated for playing the same role in the same movie, and that was the movie Iris. Judi Dench and Kate Winslet both played a version of Iris at some point in their lives. Judi Dench went on to be nominated for Best Actress, and Kate Winslet for Best Supporting Actress. The first time it happened was also with Kate Winslet, when Kate Winslet played young Rose, and Gloria Stout was nominated for old Rose in Titanic. So Kate
Oh,
Winslet
right.
has the stat. We've obviously seen with like Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando, they both played the same character, but not in the same movie. These two actresses played the same character in the same movie, and it was the second time they were both nominated for playing the same character in the same film. So that's a pretty cool stat, especially because Kate Winslet is part of both of those. And just talking about these 5 films and just the stats to get there, Critics' Choice, all these movies were nominated except for Gosford Park. Beautiful Mind did win the Critics' Choice. Beautiful Mind also won the Golden Globe for Best Drama, beating In the Bedroom and Lord of the Rings. Moulin Rouge won the Best Comedy or Musical over Gosford Park. For the BAFTA, though, they went with Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings won the BAFTA for Best Film over Beautiful Mind and Moulin Rouge. At the PGA, Moulin Rouge won Best Film. So you kind of had 3 films winning a lot. Beautiful Mind picking up the Critics' Choice and Globe, Moulin Rouge picking up the Globe and PGA, and BAFTA going with Lord of the Rings. In the Bedroom and Gosford Park didn't win as much in that season. Those were basically the 3 big movies competing for it. But also, oddly enough, this will help back up your point, Chad. The PGA, next to A Beautiful Mind, Lord of the Rings, and Moulin Rouge, nominated Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and Shrek. So Harry
Hell
Potter was a
yeah,
Best
dude.
Picture nominee at the PGA. So
They knew what
I
was
wish
going
the
on.
Oscars had taken note. But now let's actually
Yep.
get into this crop of films. We talked a lot about the history because it is so important, but let's actually get to this beautiful crop of movies, starting with A Beautiful Mind. Chad, tell us about A Beautiful Mind.
Absolutely. A Beautiful Mind, directed by Ron Howard, written by Akiva Goldsman, cinematography by Roger Deakins, music by James Horner. Wow, great crew. Starring Russell Crowe, Ed Harris, Jennifer Connelly, Christopher Plummer, Paul Bettany, Adam Goldberg, Josh Lucas, and Anthony Rapp. Synopsis: a genius mathematics scholar develops a severe paranoid schizophrenia disorder which causes him to experience life-altering delusions and hallucinations. Based on A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nassar.
Cool. So this was a first watch for me. This was, I think, not a first watch for Chad. Chad, you'd mentioned you had seen this a lot. Tell us what are your thoughts on this movie, since you are more seasoned with it.
Well, this definitely is one that I saw probably for the first time because I was in well, I said middle school. Yeah, I probably saw this for the first time when I was in high school, when I was in psychology class because paranoid schizophrenia. They're going to cover stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in college, I remember them talking about like films like Memento and things like that that like deal with other kind of
Mm-hmm.
mind disorders and things like that. But yeah, this is I feel like a really good one that has really like phenomenal acting, great direction from Ron Howard. That dude really knows what he's doing. Some of the notes that I wrote were, I like the idea of a person who is so smart yet so crazy, but it does get super sad. And then I said, I like how he figures out for himself that he's not in his right mind because the little girl does not age. So in this film, it's basically he's this really smart genius. He goes to college. He's kind of a loner, but when he does hang out with people and stuff, and they're all trying to pick up girls, he tries to use like his math skills to figure out the best way to do it. Maybe no one goes for the blonde, and we all get laid, kind of a deal. And which is kind of cool. But then he ends up not sleeping with anybody that time, and you realize that that's really not where his mind's at. He's just trying to figure out, he's writing on all the glass, all these equations, and trying to figure out things like the patterns of the pigeons walking using math and things. So they really do a good job of setting him up as the genius that's going places. He's he's like the Goodwill Hunting guy, just going places. But then the tragic downfall, if he starts to see things that aren't there, and then you realize that he's been doing it the entire movie. Like he's been
Yeah.
seeing his roommate and this little girl eventually, and Ed Harris, who's like this like government agent, the whole conspiracy thing and all this plot,
Hmm.
and you're like, none of that happens. Like that, those people weren't actually there. That
Yeah.
was all in his head. The chip in his arm that he cuts out and all this stuff. None of this happens. That's pretty insane. So it's a really cool uh, twist. But then also, if you kind of like look up what how paranoid schizophrenia really is, this is a little like moviefied. It's a little exaggerated. That was the word. They're not
Ah.
going to see. They're not going to see an entire room of analysts, working in this warehouse
Yeah.
that's not there. But it's
Hmm.
it's really cool, and it's also cool to see how stuff like this can affect family, your wife, your child. I think Jennifer Connelly gives a great performance in this. Russell Crowe is
Yeah.
fantastic in this. But yeah, I'll
Yeah.
let you go, Joe.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you've obviously had more time with this film, and maybe just because of the time you've had with it, you've been able to like kind of like dig a little deeper in this. Because I was honestly not that impressed with this one. I think this one
Hmm.
honestly felt a little bland. When you said Roger Deakins did this, I was like, wait, really? Because I honestly think a lot of the actual visual presentation of it is kind of flat. It almost kind of
Hmm.
gives me that like that I hate to use the term, but that Oscar bait feel where it's like
It
this
does.
overly
Yeah.
dramatic story about this guy who's got like either a disease or an issue or something. It's very much what you kind of see replicated in movies like, Theory of Everything and Imitation Game, these things that clearly take influence from this, but I think they honestly do it in a more intriguing way. This one kind of felt a little bland to me. And I think also it's because that twist comes so late in the movie. It comes more than halfway through where you start to realize that he is seeing these things and that they're not, that these characters you thought were real are not. And it's an interesting twist, but I think by that point, I had already kind of checked out because I was a little bit bored by the setup of it, him being this
Okay.
genius. I honestly don't love Russell Crowe's performance. I think he's almost, I think
Oh.
when you can tell an actor's acting, it kind of detracts from me. And it almost seemed like he was doing a little too much with the voice and trying too hard to, it almost like it was like he was trying a little too hard for me. Maybe that's also because I don't know how this person actually acted in real life because he is based on a real
Mhm.
person. So maybe that is a very accurate portrayal of him. But I think watching this movie with the notion that it won Best Picture, I was just expecting a little bit more from it, and it felt a little flat to me. But I think that's just what happens also when you go into a movie with those expectations of, this is the movie that won the Oscar for Best Picture, one director, one screenplay. Like those are some big, hefty awards to
Yeah.
get. Russell Crowe was coming off of Gladiator, like he was the hottest star at the time. So I expected to like this a little bit more. I think the twist is interesting. I just wish maybe they went even further with it. If they were gonna exaggerate it, I wish they went even further and like really played with the idea of this like kind of frantic schizophrenic brain, like maybe go further in the editing and the cinematography, kind of just have a more distinct kind of mad style going on. I think it would have aided it well because I think the actual presentation is a little formulaic and a little like I said, Oscar baity for a story that can go kind of off the rails if they wanted to really emphasize the point. um I don't know. I think I might need to watch this again to fully embrace it, because I think there's some interesting stuff going on in this, but I wasn't hooked for some reason, and I do think the saving grace is Jennifer Connelly. I think you mentioned it a little bit how good her performance is. I do
Mhm.
agree. I think her performance is excellent. I honestly think her Oscar of all of them, I agree with the most because I think she really did a great job. I love seeing that family dynamic. But yeah, I think it took a little too long to get to the twist. To when the twist happened, I didn't care enough to be like blown away by it. And I think that just has to do with maybe just time and seeing so many movies that were influenced by this. Sometimes you kind of forget that the original movie is kind of what set those trends. So sometimes the originals, when you go back, they seem a little cliche, even though they're really not. And I think that's kind of what this suffers from, is that so many films have done it that when you go back to this one, it seems very generic, even if it was a trendsetter, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was a little disappointed by this, not gonna lie. I honestly think, I know a lot of people hate it, but I still think Ron Howard's my favorite Ron Howard movie is the Grinch movie. I don't know. I really like it. Maybe it's
Mhm.
my Jim Carrey bias, but
I love that movie
that to
too.
me at least, I feel like it has more of a distinct personality. Whereas this, it feels like if you had not told me it was Ron Howard, I would not know who directed it because I just don't think it has that sense of ownership of style, especially when you look at this crop of movies. We're going to get into some of these movies which are very much, you know, you couldn't have any other director direct them. And this one, I feel like it could have really been anyone. Like, I didn't get that sense of ownership of style that I wish I had. But yeah, I think I owe this one another watch, I think. But this one, I think, based on the expectations I had set up for me, kind of fell the flattest. So.
No, I mean, it's interesting, like seeing you being like a first time watcher and you're disappointed by it and stuff like that. I think, yeah, I knew exactly what this was going into this watch. Like, I knew what the twist was, like,
Mhm.
and I knew to, like, go and kind of like look at the things that I knew weren't real from the get
Mhm.
go. And I'm like, that dude's not real. This is crazy, but okay. And then just seeing like the thing about like when, he drops the desk out of the window and seeing people's reactions of that. And then you're like, you see him laughing with Vision, basically Paul Bettany,
Paul Bettany.
together. And they're like laughing about this, like, that desk got destroyed. This is great. This is hilarious. And then you're just like, wait a second, he's doing that all by himself, just laughing in this room after he
Yeah.
dropped the desk out of the window. This dude is insane. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is the thing about like performances is I think a lot of the times, you just can feel different ways because watching this again, I'm like, I think Russell Crowe is impressing me in this more than like a lot of other, like, I don't like him in Les Mis. I don't like him in a lot of movies
He's
he
not good
does
at Les Mis,
today.
yeah.
I thought he was interesting actually in Love and Thunder. I haven't talked to you about Love and Thunder at all, but I thought he was kind of interesting in that. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people didn't get that, but I was like, this is kind of a different thing from Russell Crowe.
It is
But
different, yeah. I
yeah.
like it more than Javert, that's for sure.
Oh
For
yeah,
sure.
but like before this, I just didn't have that much of an opinion of Russell Crowe, and then I just feel like this is the one that's kind of a like a more straight laced, like he's not doing the big gladiator type of thing with a big accent and stuff
Mhm.
like that, and it's definitely not unhinged or anything like
Right,
that. But
right.
I like how he plays both the genius and the crazy man that
Yeah, for sure.
sorry if that's politically incorrect to call him a crazy man,
No,
but
yeah, I know what you're saying, though,
it
yeah.
yeah, I think the performances are really great. I think I like how the twist kind of puts the rest of the movie in perspective and you're like, whoa, okay. But for me, I
Mhm.
was just like, whoa, because I thought that was done pretty well. But I do get that same feeling that you got about it being Oscar baity and stuff like you kind of
Yeah.
do feel like that. And I think when you put this movie in the perspective as it won Best Picture, it won all these awards against something like Lord of the Rings and all the movies that win over something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars are always going to be like
The ones
that
that are
movie won
in the
against
magnifying glass, yeah, that you're gonna
yeah.
really, like, hope to, well, because everyone, when they have their favorite, like, franchises and stuff and it doesn't win, you always the first thing you go to is, "Well, what won?" And, like, "Well, why did
Yeah.
that win?" And it's almost like a snooty attitude, and I went into this open-minded, and I'll even admit
Yeah.
there's a film later that we'll talk about that I had no expectation for and honestly rivals what I believe is to be one of the best films, of this slate.
Wow.
So, like, there is potential for a surprise. I was hoping this would be the one, but just didn't
Yeah.
work for me. Yeah.
But to finish it off, my last kind of thought on this one is that I do like, well, it's a good biopic, I think. Great. We kind of disagree on maybe if it's great or
Mm.
not, or I don't even know if I think it's great, to be honest. We'll figure it out with my ranking. But I do enjoy this film. I don't know, maybe it could be a little bit more compacted, not like as, I don't know if it's long, but maybe it feels a little long. I'm not sure. But I do like how he through kind of loving his wife and just wanting to be okay has to like kind of like get over this like mental illness, but he's never ever really actually able to. He keeps seeing all the
Mhm.
things that he's seeing, but he just ignores them.
He learns how to, like,
And just
coexist. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and that this kind of feels exactly like how, you get away from all the extravagant stuff. It feels like how someone who lives with this kind of thing actually lives with this because I was looking up a little bit of it and it's like, they don't see all of that stuff, but like even with medication and stuff like that, they're never able to 100% just get rid of everything that they experience. And I
Right.
feel like that's pretty accurate. So I
Yeah.
enjoy this one,
Yeah,
but
no, that's fun. Yeah, we don't always agree here on Picture This, but that makes for the best discussions, I think. So, A
Mhm.
Beautiful Mind,
For
though,
sure.
the Academy definitely was on Chad's side, so because it won 4 of the 8 Oscars it was nominated for, won Best Picture, Best Director for Ron Howard, Best Supporting Actress for Jennifer Connelly, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It was nominated for Best Actor for Russell Crowe, who lost to Denzel Washington, Original Score, Makeup, and film editing. The makeup is very good. I like that makeup in
Oh
the
yeah.
last half. I actually believed he was older, which was pretty good. I think the second half is better than the first for
Yeah.
sure.
They love their
But
biopics for sure, though,
they
Hollywood.
do. They do. A lot of interesting nominees there. A very pretty notable cast of characters. Speaking of cast, though, let's move on to Gosford Park because this has a cast, and I'm gonna like sit back, maybe go get a pee break or a coffee break while Chad rattles off all the names in this movie because there are a lot of them. Chad, tell us about Gosford Park.
I didn't put every name down, but I put a few. Gosford Park, directed by Robert Altman, who also did Nashville. We covered that.
Mhm.
Written by Julian Fellows. Cinematography by Andrew Dunn. Music by Harry Potter composer Patrick Doyle, also Thor composer. Starring
Huh.
Michael Gambon, another Harry Potter, Dumbledore. Kristen Scott Thomas, Camilla Rutherford, another Harry Potter one, Maggie Smith, McGonagall. Charles Dance, Geraldine Somerville, Tom Hollander, Clive Owen, Jeremy Swift, who plays Higgins in Ted Lasso, if you love Ted
That's right.
Lasso, Helen Mirren, Emily Watson, Richard E. Grant, Ryan Phillippe, and Stephen Fry, the great comedian Stephen Fry, who is in a later Lord of the Rings series.
That is right.
Synopsis: a murder occurs at a dinner party. I
Yes.
kept that one pretty short.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on in Gosford Park, but the premise
Mhm.
is very basically surface level. It's someone gets murdered at a dinner party and they investigate who it is. But I think the interesting thing about Gosford Park is how it is set up. I think it's kind of honestly similar to Beautiful Mind in the fact that you don't get the murder till more than halfway through. The
Yeah.
beginning is very much set up. But I think for this film, because of the amount of characters, you really do need that setup to kind of like introduce exactly who everyone is, their status, which is very important in this film, the upstairs, downstairs, and the divide between classes. You know, you have the very upper class, rich people, and then you have the people downstairs, the people who are working for the house, the people who have their own little community within itself. Um, and you really need time to like set up all the different relationships also because you know this is not as much a murder mystery as it is just like a character ensemble piece, but there is a mystery element to it where you do kind of want to try to figure out who it is, and you know the clues that are dropped early on in the first half do help with that. It's interesting because I didn't see this movie either. This was a first time watch for me, so I had no idea who was going to get murdered and who was going to be the murderer, and any of that. So like I was definitely not, you know, picking up on all the vibes early on. But I want to ask you, Chad, as someone who has seen this before, was that kind of hinted at early on? Like tell me about your process watching this again now as a rewatch, because murder mysteries are always interesting to watch
Yeah.
again once you kind of know what's going to happen and who's going to do it.
Well, first, I want to say that this is definitely in Robert Altman's bag. You can tell this is a
Okay.
Robert Altman film because
Yeah.
you don't know if there's like a necessarily actual singular focus of the film. There's so many
Hmm.
things going on, so many characters, so many storylines, but he's always able to make them come together super well and make them
Hmm.
all fit together. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like, why do you need that? Why do you need that? It all feels like it's an actual like community that's just vibing together and that would
Yeah.
actually exist. And the
Almost like
way
you're
he
just living
films
with
it,
them. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And the way he films it is super interesting too. Just like the different aspects of the house and, everybody come together. And I feel like this is a more like confined movie than Nashville is too, because it's just in like
Yeah.
one location. Even though it
Hmm.
feels like a lot of locations, it's just like one
Yeah.
big house.
I was gonna say I think this lends itself much better to the ensemble nature because Robert Altman, he's an
Yes.
ensemble guy. He
Yeah.
likes to have as many stars, as many faces as he can. But I think in Nashville sometimes I struggled to kind of piece it all together and to kind of like grasp onto what the focus was. I know it was more just living with these characters, which is great. But I think this one is just a better template for so many stars because a murder mystery, you want as many different names in the pool to try to like confuse you and disregard your attention and kind of make you guess. And I like just this house, like you said, kind of like this one location as a way to like use this ensemble in a more confined space. I do think this was a much better setting for an ensemble piece like this, and I think this serves
Yeah.
his style much better. I think, yeah.
I definitely agree with you about like, the house being a better like kind of setting. I think as a film, I like Nashville a little more. Not a
Oh, interesting.
lot
Okay.
more, but I think a
Right.
little
Okay.
more.
Mm.
This one, it's just kind of weird the way I was introduced to this movie because I always like heard that it was like Clue. It's only like Clue in like maybe two ways, where it's a murder mystery and there's a lot of people in a house. It's not funny. It's not like comedic, pretty
Hmm.
really at all.
Okay.
That I
Yeah.
thought. I mean, maybe there's a couple like little, stuff. I feel like this movie is Downton Abbey with a murder.
Yeah, and it
And
inspired Downton Abbey. It was actually Downton Abbey
oh,
was gonna
okay,
be Downton Abbey was gonna be a Gosford Park series, and then they decided to kind of like tweak it and set it in a different decade and kind of rename it. But originally, it was gonna be a Gosford Park spinoff. So I think you're not too far off. Like this was a direct
yeah,
inspiration of Downton Abbey, and I definitely got those
actually,
vibes, and not just because of
yeah.
Maggie Smith. I just got the vibes in general.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that was a fact, but thank you for informing me.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah, there
cool.
you
Actually,
go.
that I was spot on. But yeah, I don't think Downton Abbey. I really haven't watched it, but I don't think it's really my thing, especially like based on Gosford Park. I just like found myself not super caring about any of these people in this house, this like stuffy family. I did find the like the help or whatever, the help, the servers and all that people
Hmm.
like that
The
life and
downstairs, yeah.
the way they, yeah, the downstairs, all them talking about who served who and their parents, were they waiters too, or whatever you call it, like butlers or whatever they are.
Hmm.
Were they all that too and stuff like that? Like that whole like kind of subculture, kind of felt like sociology a little bit there, like just
Mm.
trying to figure out that like kind of
Yeah.
culture, but also like the rich culture and stuff too. And I feel like this is a very good movie for that, like depicting like what one of these big dinner parties where they also go like hunt pheasants and stuff like that
Hmm.
kind of actually is. But you get like interesting characters where like Ryan Phillippe is, I think he's like an actor, but he doesn't
Hmm.
really like,
He's doing like this fake Scottish accent.
yeah. And it's kind of interesting, but people can all tell that he's not the real thing because there's like, I
Hmm.
don't understand that
Yeah.
accent,
Well, and then you've
stuff
got
like
the
that.
interplay of both classes, like especially with Emily
Yeah.
Watson's character. She's having an affair with Michael Gambon's character, and at this dinner party, she basically goes to defend him, basically outing that affair, and gets fired for it. And you start to see like if there's an affair amongst this upper class, usually they'd
Mhm.
sort it out different. But because it's someone from downstairs having an affair with someone upstairs, she's immediately axed from
Yeah.
working there. And I just think that's kind of the most interesting stuff to me, is that level of class, that balance of class, and just those different conversations. I honestly think the murder, it's interesting, but it's not the most interesting part for me. It's the seeing how these two totally different classes interact, the attitudes they have toward one another, the intermingling they have with one another, how the actual murder mystery is carried out based on who they are focusing on, upper and lower class. I think that's probably the most interesting aspect. And I do agree, like I think there's almost too many characters where it's still hard to kind of,
Mhm.
you know, focus in on every single one. Like I think Charles Dance is pretty underutilized in this. I think there are some characters that just aren't as um notable when you look at the whole grand scheme of things. But yeah, I think that's just Robert Altman in general. I think it's either you love the ensemble thing or you don't, and sometimes it gets in the way a little bit in this. But I did think it was interesting to see just the intermingling between classes for sure.
Well, two things that I just
Hmm.
thought about. One, I wish people would frame this in a different way when they suggest it to people. Like, don't
Mm,
say this is a murder movie. Say
right.
this is a movie like Downton Abbey. It's like, about class, struggles and
Hmm.
just class differences and stuff like that. And it's just a big cast and stuff like that. Let people find out about the murder
Yeah,
themselves. I feel like.
because it adds a
But
little
people,
spice to it. Yeah, it's a fun little twist if you don't know it's coming.
exactly. And people compare this to Clue and they're just very like, I know it's a murder mystery, so I'm going to say it's a murder mystery. So, I'm not just mocking people. And we're saying like, this is
Right,
what
right.
people say. And I'm like, well, you framed the movie differently for me. So I was just waiting for the murder to happen the entire
Hmm.
movie. And then like, it doesn't happen till way later. And then I'm like, what is this movie? I thought there was going to be a murder and everyone was going to try
Yeah,
to figure it out, put on their magnifying glasses. And it's nothing
right.
like that. And
Yeah.
that's what Clue is. And but anyways, there's that, and I also kind of watched this with a mutual friend, as like a screen pass type of situation, and that's also not a way to watch this movie at all because there's
No,
so much
you
happening.
need to
I got
focus.
a,
Yeah.
I got a lot more enjoyment out of this movie the second time actually focusing on, but it was
Nice.
still tough. I feel like I might need a third watch, the way like my
Yeah.
attention issues affect my
Yeah.
film watching. I think Gosford
Mhm.
Park is one that you need to hyper focus in on.
Analyze
But
every hyper focus, that's
yeah,
a great way to say it.
but
Yeah.
I will say that I don't hate any movie that's kind of like a murder mystery with like a twist and like a ensemble cast, stuff like that. 'Cause I adore Knives Out. I thought that should have been a Best Picture movie. I think
Yeah.
that's leagues better than Gosford Park,
Hmm.
personally.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I agree. I like
yeah.
it better. Yeah, because like what you said, it's not a murder mystery first and foremost. It is, yeah, it's a character piece. It's a study on class. It is a British dinner party. Then the murder comes in as an extra element, an extra layer. And I like what you said about like advertise it as something else. Let the murder be the surprise.
Mhm.
Kind of like A Beautiful Mind. Like make it advertise it like it's a movie about a mathematician. Let the schizophrenic stuff be the
Yeah,
twist that happens, and it kind of is. But I think everyone who watches Beautiful Mind now knows that element, just like people who watch Gosford Park know that it's about a murder mystery, kind of like
yeah.
um and I think that's honestly what helps one of the other movies that we're going to talk about soon, like that there is stuff that happens that you don't see coming, and I
Oh,
like that as
right.
well, that
Okay.
that's not necessarily advertised through its synopsis. But yeah, Gosford Park, very interesting. Nominated for 7 Academy Awards, wins 1. It wins for Best Original Screenplay, which, we kinda mentioned. Yeah, it's a very rich screenplay. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of stuff going on. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Robert Altman, Best Supporting Actress for 2 actresses, Helen Mirren and Maggie Smith, 2 veterans. Interesting because I probably would have gone with Kelly MacDonald or, Emily Watson over the 2 of them, but, who knows? Maybe we'll talk about some of them later. Art direction and costume design. What's up, Chad?
Oh, I just wanted to say, because I did want to touch on one more thing where I was
Yeah,
talking about like I do think that Helen Mirren is really great in this, where she
yeah.
plays because it turns out she's the mom of Clive Owen, and it was a whole thing. We don't have to get
Yeah.
into the whole thing
We
about
won't
why
necessarily
he.
spoil all of the details about that, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff she has in the last act that is important and integral to the overall
I
story. Yeah.
think her performance towards the end, though, I think makes me like this movie more if it
Yeah.
wasn't there,
Yeah,
because
she's really
she,
great. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, and Maggie Smith too. Like they literally put her in Downton Abbey. Uh,
great.
she's perfect for this type of role. She had a big year this year. She was also in Harry Potter, which is really great. But yeah, like a lot of great ins and outs. It was nominated for art direction, all these different rooms, all these different bedrooms. Why don't we
Have
go
to.
in the bedroom? Why don't we talk about
Which
in
one?
the bedroom?
In the Bedroom,
In the
directed by
bedroom,
Todd
yes.
Todd Field, written by Todd Field and Robert Festinger. Cinematography by Antonio Calvash. Music by Thomas Newman. Starring Sissy Spacek, Tom Wilkinson, Nick Stahl, Marissa Tomei, and William Mapother. Synopsis: a tragedy occurs as a boy coming of age in Maine has a summer fling with an older single mother.
Yes. And this is kind of what I alluded to earlier with like knowing that Beautiful Mind is about a guy who has schizophrenia, knowing Gosford Park is a murder mystery, those twists don't necessarily hit as much. Here, they say tragedy, but they don't really specify. And I think that's one of the elements that most took me by surprise of all these movies, just that
Yeah,
when the tragedy hits, and we don't necessarily have to talk about who dies or what happens, but like it really is such a polarizing, crazy moment. It honestly reminded me of Manchester by the Sea when there's that like one moment where just
love that
everything kind of
movie.
changes. This to me just gave me such Manchester by the Sea vibes, and I don't know if it's because it was set in
Same,
Maine. I don't know if it's because it was set in Maine and because Manchester by the Sea is set in New England as
because
well.
they're
Like
also,
something
like, on a
about New
boat
England.
fishing and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
right.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
got the
in the
same vibe.
bedroom, yeah, and in the bedroom itself refers to the it's the lobster trap, the 2 lobsters. It's called the bedroom. It can only hold 2 lobsters before the lobsters begin to turn on one another. Like that's the title
Oh,
as said in the beginning of the movie when he's talking about when he's on the boat with the lobsters. So it's also interesting because that title really doesn't inform you at all what the movie's
yeah,
about, and it doesn't really have much of a relevance to the story, which I'm okay with. I mean, like it's a detail that they thought they'd cling on to. I guess there could be a double meaning depending on like the very end last scene of the film. Maybe there's something to take from that as well. But the actual in the bedroom stuff, it's a very misleading title. But yeah, like I totally got those Manchester by the Sea vibes. I think New England itself, and I'm not here to criticize New England, but it gives very like dreary, kind of like sad, like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
lends to this type of story very well. Like I feel like it's the cold. You kind of think of more of a brisk, colder weather up there too, just like kind of that nature. I think really suits a film like this really well. It's kind of sad, but I mean, it's supposed to be sad, and I think that this film in Manchester by the Sea, the setting really helps with it for some reason. Just the idea of this cold kind of brisk, windy atmosphere.
yeah.
I don't know. But
Oh, I
Chad, tell me, because
definitely.
this was both of our first watch, so let me know
Mhm.
your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I definitely know exactly what you mean about the Maine setting and stuff like that. A lot of horrific things happen up in Maine, thanks to Mr. Stephen King. But
That
yeah,
too, yeah.
I also got heavy Manchester by the Sea vibe. So I got really excited when you said that because I was like, I was just talking about Manchester by the Sea when watching this movie. So you're not
Hmm.
alone.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I adore that movie. That was one of the big movies that like helped me start on my like film journey
cool.
in a big way. But yeah,
Hmm.
this film I enjoyed quite a lot. I really like crime films. This also reminded me of a film that we'll cover later. I think maybe in the series actually,
Mystic River.
Mystic River.
Yep, we will
Mystic
in
River.
two months. Yep.
I got a very good because I also really like that movie. Have you seen that one?
No, I'm not.
You haven't seen that one yet? Okay, so I won't talk about it, but it's another crime film. And when I was because I had to check this one out on Apple TV Plus, and
Mm,
it said crime in the thing, so I went, "Oh, this is a crime film, not like a
yeah.
romance thing." In the
Hmm.
bedroom might be a romance. It's a crime movie. Okay, so I kind of got a little bit of a lead, but I didn't know at all what's
Hmm.
going on. So the thing that happens, like the inciting incident, I guess, is really shocking. I
Yeah.
agree, and it kind of also gave me a little bit of like the Place Beyond the Pines vibe because it's like a
Yes.
main character that like might
You
not be
think is going to be
around
the
the entire
focus,
movie.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you think they're going to be the focus of the whole movie. I agree with that too. Place Beyond the Pines.
yeah,
I really, I think this movie, yeah, like there's almost a little bit of everything. It's a crime film, but it's
yeah.
a romance, it's a drama, it's got a
Mhm.
little action at the end, like suspense thriller at the end
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Which again, like that final act is just like it goes a direction you don't necessarily expect it to go, but then afterward, when it's all said and done, you kind of go back and you're like, whoa, like that was cool. It was almost like it had a little bit of everything, but it all kind of made sense together. It all really just
Yeah.
merged together very beautifully.
Yeah.
Um,
They're
as
like
this way, yeah, as a story of grief, but also just as an entertaining film itself.
absolutely. I agree with all of that. Like them setting up kind of just all these relationships and then the thing happens and then that sets up the rest of the movie to be like, different. And it's a different
Hmm.
vibe, but that's how things like this happen. Life's going to kind of be a different vibe for a while. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what this movie goes into and it's just like
Yeah.
a sad, just kind of people going along their daily stuff, but everything's
Hmm.
different. And then you get another like kind of kitchen fight that's pretty epic. That reminded me of Marriage Story a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
And
It,
then
it reminds me of so many different films, but I think it's
yeah,
because like this kind of has a lot of everything, and like there are so
yeah,
many, and this is not one of those films like I was talking about Beautiful Mind. It seems like it inspired a lot of films, but because it inspired so many other films, it kind of feels a little cliche. This still didn't feel cliche to me. It still
no,
felt fresh and original, like something I had never seen, and it was just I was just intrigued by every second, and I do think it's long, but I think what do you cut out of it? Because you need that beginning to set up the relationships, you need that
yeah,
middle where everyone's kind of at odds with one another, and then you need that ending as like that conclusion, the
oh yeah,
kind of closure that this family needs. And that whole ending, it just took me by such surprise because it was like, wow, I did not expect it to go this direction. And the
yeah.
acting, ooh, the
Oh man,
acting
it's a
is so
great
good.
acting movie. I was
The
about to
acting is
say,
so
yeah.
good.
This one is one that it's interesting that this is the one that's like talked about the least. Like no one really ever talks about this
I
movie.
had
It's
never
just
heard of this. Yeah.
forgotten about.
Hmm.
And it was nominated for Best Picture, like alongside like Fellowship of the Ring, Moulin Rouge, and all these movies people do talk about. And it's just kind of weird that like I'm like, well, this one is actually pretty damn good. And like I think really does deserve Best Picture nom. Just
Absolutely.
like a Mystic River and a lot of the other movies that we've touched on. That it may be inspired, maybe not, but it at least feels like those movies, like you're saying. And then like when the thing happens, it like every moment that happens that's kind of big, like it's meandering, but not in a bad way. It's like
Hmm.
purposefully meandering for a while.
Yes.
Like life is
Every
kind of
second matters.
dreary
Yeah.
and sad and grief and all this stuff. And then the things that happen, and then you're like, oh shit. I was
Yeah.
waiting for this to happen, and this is insane.
Yeah. Well, and I might get into a little bit of spoilery talk, so if you haven't seen this,
Okay.
I recommend maybe fast forwarding a minute or something. But like at the end, when because basically one of the parents of the person murdered goes basically out to kill the murderer, and you don't know if he's necessarily going to murder the murderer, but like you kind of have an inkling that it could happen at any second. And when it does happen,
Mhm.
it's like this big thing. But then the surprise came when he came back home. I wasn't sure if everyone was necessarily in on it. So at that last
Yeah.
moment when Sissy Spacek turns to him and is like, "Did you do it?" I'm like,
Did you do it? Yeah.
"Whoa!" It's just like
Nice.
so cool. Like this movie was so cool. Like I don't like
Yeah.
to describe this as cool because it's a it's this piece on grief, but like this moment had so many just like chill moments where I was just like, "Ooh, like that is cinema."
Yeah.
Like yeah, baby, like that is like the rich, good stuff I live for. Like those are the
I
twists,
agree.
and they're not these mind blowing twists of like it was this person all along, or this was like it's a very subtle twist, but it's like a little twist in the fact that like you don't necessarily know who's in on what and what where this film's going. And I love movies like that that don't necessarily have these huge reveals, but have little reveals that just totally change the meaning of everything. And in the bedroom, it's quite literally a lobster trap, but it could also be like this like in the bedroom is where they finally have peace at the end, like it's the two of them, but also you see she has
Yeah.
peace, but he maybe doesn't have peace with this action. Like he kind of seems almost a little like uh void of
He
emotion
had
at
to
the end.
do it.
Maybe
So,
it's
yeah.
because he didn't want to do it. He wanted
Mhm.
her to be safe and feel well and
True.
feel
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
comfortable. Um,
'Cause she couldn't be happy without
yeah,
that piece, like you're
and
saying.
I
But,
like how this also takes place not during the court case, because like the court case, you could have
yeah.
this whole movie be a courtroom drama, but it's not. You see a little bit of the court case, and that's where Marissa Tomei really gets to shine. But then after that, you kind of have this waiting period between him getting off on bail and him basically having a retrial, and it's that middle ground where they're living for most of this movie. And I like that, the idea that the murderer, he's gonna get put in jail later, but like you have this time period where you're seeing him at the store, you're seeing him at the grocery store, you're seeing him on the streets, and what that does to a family who has literally seen someone that they love taken away by this person. He's standing in a grocery store drinking a coffee right next to you. Like that stuff is so emotional too. And I like
Oh,
how it
yeah.
wasn't just this courtroom drama. It could have been, and it probably would have been really good, but I like how it's not. It's more about what we do in our everyday lives that is impacted by this tragedy rather than just getting justice the whole time.
The ending, like you were talking about, like I won't talk about the whole ending, but we've alluded to kind of what happens. And but when the thing happens at the end, I wrote a note that when they make the reveal, I said, "This is what friends are for." When when the one guy is helping him with this plan, and then you slowly get to see like what the plan actually was, and because
Mm,
you never see them planning anything, and then like you see like this is what friends are for, and then the guy shows up, the thing happens, and then you're like, he seems surprised, and you're like, was that not part of the plan? What were they going to do? And then he goes like, we're supposed to do this in the woods, and you're like, oh, okay.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, just like the little twists and turns, it's so good. And Todd Field, not a very like notable name. Like he's done
Right.
some acting stuff, but he really hasn't directed a ton. He's done three movies, one which hasn't even come out yet. It's coming out later this year, Tar. But he did In the Bedroom, Little
Oh.
Children. Little Children, I don't think was nominated for Best Picture, but it was nominated for several acting awards. It was nominated for I can't even find it right now, but yeah, he was Little Children was nominated for some stuff, but like he's not as big of a filmmaker. But I think honestly that kind of makes this such a special movie to me, is because like it's not like you said, the Moulin Rouges or Lord of the Rings are the ones that are still talked about today. It's not a director who's really talked about today. Even some of the stars are not like the biggest stars working today. They're almost kind of like more now supporting characters in some movies more so than the leads. So I think that's what makes it so special, is because this was almost like a hidden gem. Like we didn't know
Mhm.
what this movie was, and when I saw it, I was like, this is the one I kind of told you about. I was like, I think this kind of rivals Lord of the Rings in a way, because Lord of the Rings I've just spent so much time in my life with, but like this one, I don't want to spoil my ranking, but I'm like, this movie though just blew me away, and
Yeah.
I'm tempted to do it, and we'll see when we get to my ranking. Maybe maybe it's not number two. Maybe I will put it all the way at the tippity top. Who knows?
Interesting.
But
I
go ahead,
Mhm.
Chad.
I was just gonna add that I adore Tom Wilkinson ever since. And you saw what I ranked Michael Clayton really high
You ranked it
because I
number one,
love
yeah.
Tom Wilkinson so much. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. In the
greatness.
bedroom, though, the Academy did not bite for it. The Academy did not go for it in terms of
Bunch of
wins, but
jabronis.
it was nominated for 5 big awards. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Tom Wilkinson, Best Actress for Sissy Spacek, Best Supporting Actress for Marissa Tomei, and Best Adapted Screenplay. So it picked up some big nominations, just no wins.
Mhm.
But what picked up the most nominations and the most wins of the slate was Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. We talked about it a little bit on the show already, but let's talk about it in depth. Chad, tell us about Fellowship of the Ring.
The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, directed by. Can you give me a little bit of a score while I do
Oh,
this?
oh,
Directed by Peter
yeah.
Jackson. Keep going.
Do do
Written
do
by
do 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 do
written by Fran Walsh,
do do
Philippa
do
Boyens, and Peter
do
Jackson. Cinematography by
do do
Andrew Lesney. I can't do like a what's her face, Kate Blanchett. Music by Howard. I can't do it. Music
Yeah,
by
it's okay.
Howard Shore. I tried to do the Galadriel voice.
Oh,
Starring Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin, Sean Bean, Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan, John Rhys Davies, Orlando Bloom, Liv Tyler, Kate Blanchett, Christopher Lee, Hugo Weaving, Ian Holm, and Andy Serkis, boy. Synopsis: A hobbit is tasked with the destruction of a very evil ring.
yes.
Based on The
And
Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. Good.
that's right, which is right behind me now. The first of 3 movies, which we will cover on the show. I really don't think you really need to go too far in depth with this movie because everyone has kind of seen it or they've at least heard of it. Um, but I mean, it goes without words. This is a very special trilogy for me. I love this movie. I love these 3 movies. Spoiler alert for the next few months, but like these movies are such an important part of my movie going experience. Not movie going because I didn't see these in theaters, but like movie watching experience. And Lord of the Rings: Fellowship of the Ring, it's the one that introduces us to all the characters. It's the one where we like really get to meet all these characters and are introduced to this world. And I think that's just what this movie has over all the other Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth movies is it's the first, and it's the one where we get to first see all the awe and beauty of what Peter Jackson has created. Now, I'll admit it is the exposition, so I think the story only goes into further, more exciting ventures ahead. But I think there's something so special about just setting the scene that this film does really well and does really beautifully, especially in its design and its world building, in its practicality, in the way they just thought out every single shot of this to have children be stand-ins for the hobbits when they're standing with the adults, and just the way they maneuvered
Yeah.
filming all those scenes. I mean, the appendices in some of the box set Blu-ray box sets that you'll see, like those are sometimes even more fun to watch in the movies because it's all the ins and outs of the filmmaking. And this is one of those films that I implore everyone to look at behind the scenes on how they made them, because it is one of just the best technical feats in cinema, I think, especially because they filmed all 3 of these back to back, wanting to keep the actors all looking the same, keeping all the production just moving. They really didn't take breaks between production, which is also something that we don't see a lot of films doing. We see a lot of films waiting to get greenlit. I mean, you see Dune, they waited to see how it did before they greenlit a second one. Here, they said, you know what, you're making all 3, we'll see how it goes. And I really like that about it. And I like that we can get these back to back to back 3 years in a row to keep it all feeling fresh in our brains. But Chad, tell me, what are your thoughts on Fellowship?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Dune because that had a very like everyone's like this is a very Lord of the Rings feel because it has like a distinct like ending, but it feels very continuous. Like they haven't finished their journey yet, and that's exactly how this movie feels, but not in a bad way. It's like it's great setup for the world building, leading to something else. But honestly, and I'll preface this by saying that I didn't grow up watching these. I could have. I was around the age that I think a lot of people were getting into Lord of the Rings, but I wasn't really into Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, and I was like big into Harry Potter and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just never really like the high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings. I just wasn't into like the big epic Lord of the Rings films and stuff like that as I am kind of now. And people have like talked a lot about them, and then I started watching them more and more and more, and I've seen them quite a few times now. And when I sat down, I was like, I'm gonna watch Lord of the Rings, through like extended editions. For this, I watched theatrical edition
Yes,
again.
I did too.
But when I was going through it, I'm like, these are so well made, just so enjoyable. Like, it's not like the characters are so sweet, but it has like a lot of sweet moments, but a lot of dark moments, and they're all blended so well. And just like everything that happens, there's like not really much like fat to cut off of this. In fact, most people enjoy the extended editions of these because they're like, I just want to live in this world. I just want to be with these
Yeah.
characters. Just everything about this is so excellent. And just like amazingly made that, like, I really enjoy watching these films every time. I always have, as far as franchise, and I'm really pissed that, Harry Potter got like no love, and every Lord of the Rings gets nominated, and people are pissed off that not everyone won. And I'm like, well, Harry Potter got like nothing. They
in
couldn't
terms of
even
Best
give
Picture,
Harry Potter the score this time. They
Yeah.
had to give it to Lord of the Rings, which it's a fantastic score. So I understand, but I'm like, give Harry Potter something. Anyways,
Yeah.
off of my tangent, I adore this movie specifically, and I don't know, it may be my favorite of the three, because you're
Interesting.
talking
Okay,
about
cool.
how the other movies get into the bigger, more exciting things. I don't think I like that as much as the setup, which I think is really interesting to people like, this movie has all of the exposition, the setup. I'm like, yeah, but they make the exposition like great. It's like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Galadriel just explaining things, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not bad at all. Like exposition, like Scorsese does exposition all the time, just voiceover and just stuff like that. But he does it in such an interesting way that you like it.
Right.
It's not boring, or it doesn't drag the movie down explaining things. And I think building up this world was so perfectly done by Peter Jackson and all the writers and everything and all the performers, that I feel like you're never bored by this movie. Something's always happening. You're like, oh, this part's coming up. Oh, sweet. Okay, I love this part. The ring falling on his finger and him disappearing. Everybody going,
Yeah.
oh shit. Pippin and Mary causing trouble, and full of a took, and fly, you fools. There's so many great moments in this that I just for me, I know everybody, because of, and we'll get into this later months and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
like, everybody talks about the big battles in the other movies, and this one doesn't have as many, or really any, actually.
Yeah, it
But
has
there's
some
one.
action
There's one
sequences.
towards
There's
the
the
end.
the
Yeah.
Balrog fight, and then the fight with the orcs in the woods with Boromir.
Yeah.
Like, those are the two big like action set pieces. But yeah, there's no like battles, big wars or anything. Yeah.
And I don't know, people like love to like, oh, that battle
Oh, and
scene
there's
is
the
so
Saruman Gandalf fight in the beginning also, which is also
right.
pretty fun.
True.
Yeah.
But with him
Which I think is
spinning
my
in
favorite fight in the
circles
movie. Yeah, I
and
think
stuff
that's my
like
favorite fight
that.
in the movie for sure. Yeah.
But like the big battle sequences, people like go, oh, I love that battle of blank, 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 some crazy weird word that JRR made up. And then I'm like, yeah, but those are kind of the most boring parts. Like, they're not very character oriented. And I think that's my favorite parts of Lord of the Rings, is the character oriented
Right.
stuff. I love to see the characters interacting, not just people fighting, even though they're expertly crafted. I agree. I will say, though, I watched this in like a 4K streaming. I feel like some parts of Fellowship definitely do kind of feel like they were made in 2001.
Yeah. Yeah.
The not only the troll in the Moria or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
but also like when Kate Blanchett shows up and she goes, they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm the
She
Kate
kind of
Blanchett," and
yeah.
you're like, "Ooh, that kind of looks a little weird." But
Yeah.
the movie's so great, you don't care, and
hmm
it's just such a great movie. I
Yeah.
adore this movie now,
Yeah.
and I'll let
I
you
think
talk.
it's I think it's kind of like Harry Potter, where like there are some CGI things that don't always work, but
Yes.
because the rest of the film is so practical, that stuff is so real that it doesn't really take away. I mean, the CGI, I'll admit, like in 2001, it's a little wonky, it's a little shaky, and even in 2003, 2 years later, it's already a miles better. Like the effects in Return of the King, we'll get into
Yeah.
it, are much better than this, but I think there's almost a charm in that. It kind of gives it its own little like kind of historic landmark in history. Like, I kind of like dated effects to an extent because it kind of just
Okay.
informs you about the era. Like the prequels, there's something charming in
Mhm.
Star Wars. The prequels in Star Wars,
Yeah.
there's something a little
We know.
charming
We
about
know.
the visuals. There's something a little charming about the visuals, even though they're not as amazing now. Like, there's something a little charming about it because it's like that's what it was at the time, and it's kind of nice to see this evolution of cinema
Are you
and
gonna
I
do
almost
the?
yeah, no, I do really like. I don't love the visuals here, but I like how they are unchanged. I like how they didn't go back and try to fix them. I like how it kind of exists as its own landmark. I don't really have much else to add because you've touched on all the great scenes. Like it's one of those films where I don't think you need to like criticize a ton of it because it just is what it is, and
Oh,
people have loved it for so long. And I I I I see where you're coming from. Like I like how character oriented it is. I love it as well.
yeah.
And it's hard to rank these three. They change all the time for me. I just always have been more drawn to the others, just in general because this is the first. So sometimes when I watch the trilogy together, I have the more recent stuff in my brain, and I sometimes like go
Hmm.
back to, oh yeah, the first one. This is what happened there. But like I love what happened later. But you're right. Like watching this just as its own thing. Like it's the first time we're introduced to these characters. We need to fall in love with them, and they do a good job making you fall in love with all of them. Like even Samwise, he's my
Oh
favorite
my god.
character next to
Oh yeah.
Chewbacca in movie history. He's my number two. It's Chewbacca and Samwise Gamgee. Like he is kind of what I've always tried to model myself after. It's just that idea of like,
Yes.
like
He's the Paddington of the franchise.
I won't let you out of my sight. Like I'll always stand by you to where like he puts himself in so much danger because he's putting his friend first. And that ending with the two of them on the boat, that to me is my favorite scene
Oh
of the
my
whole movie
god.
because it's the most character oriented. And did he need to start drowning and Frodo pull him out? Probably not. Like that's a little much, but like it's so cute. And this interaction they have, it's heartwarming, it's sentimental, and it really drives the next two films forward, especially adding Gollum to the mix later. And I honestly forgot how much Gollum was in this, because when I
Yeah.
watched these movies, I watched the extendeds. This is my first time watching the theatrical cut, and I
Oh.
think it's interesting because seeing what they cut, I think this one does a great job cutting stuff down to where it feels still so complete. It doesn't feel like anything's missing. But the extended, it adds a lot to it. But this one, I feel like was probably the best. Well, I haven't seen the other two, but I think this was one of the best ways you could trim down a film. And I give a lot of credit to the editing team. It didn't win best editing, and I honestly don't remember what did that year because it wasn't any of these five films. But like, I was really impressed with the editing, seeing what the extended is to see what they cut down for this. I was just blown away by how well they were able to just like seamlessly do that. And I'm looking right now. The best film editing went to Black Hawk Down. Interesting, Black Hawk Down.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, action and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
war.
But I think once you've seen the extended and the theatrical, it's really impressive to see that they were able to keep so much and still get such a powerful story out of it. Whereas one of my big gripes with one of the future Lord of the Rings films is that one huge scene from the extended editions is cut for the theatrical. So I've heard, and I just don't see how you can cut that scene. But this one,
Mm.
I felt like everything was there, everything was complete, and I enjoyed it
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
One more Samwise quote is, "I ain't been dropping no eaves." Um,
I love that. Yes. Have you been eavesdropping? I've been dropping out eaves. Like, so funny. Just so
There's
great.
such great dialogue in this, and I
So
just
good.
love how all of these characters just come together, and they're just like they all feel so genuine, and just that sweet vibe of this. Just like I
Hmm.
think the first, well, especially in the extended edition, but the first like kind of half because it was broken up, I think, into like two VHSs
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
like
Or
that. So like the
discs. Yeah.
first or discs, right? So the first ending of the first disc is like oh, we're all going, like, I'll go with him, I'll go with Frodo. And then Pippin's like, I'll go too. Right. Where are we going? And then just love like just stuff like that. It's just like,
Yeah.
just so sweet and cute. But also like, just like the darkest like world that they're in. The Shire is just this like little sweet village, but they have also their
Yeah.
own little politics and family trouble. Like those damn Sackville Bagginses are the worst. But
Yeah.
but anyways, I wanted to touch on before we end discussion of the Lord of the Rings, the extended versus theatrical, because it's always kind of like I don't know if it's a debate, but I feel like most people are who are huge Lord of the Rings fans. They're like extended editions, and I won't hear anything else, only
Yeah.
extended editions. And I'm like, I kind of agree with you, where it's like I don't feel like this one you have to watch the extended edition. I think the theatrical edition is fantastic,
Hmm.
except if you want a little more, if you want another hour of movie, I think
Yeah.
this is
I
like
think
one
this
of
one
the
is a half
only.
hour. Yeah. Yeah. But still, like, it's a lot of movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think
The
like
later
yeah,
ones,
this is
they
the
add even more.
only movie or movie franchise maybe where you can say that the theatrical movie that's still 3 hours long if you want another 30 minutes or an hour, hour and a half, or whatever they add with the extendeds, it doesn't really hurt it necessarily, but it also just like you love to have that extra stuff in
Mm-hmm.
there and it helps
Yep.
it. So
Yeah. Especially if you're spending like the whole day just watching these. Like if you have time to kill, why not kill it with
some
more
people do,
Middle
yeah.
Earth? But yeah, I agree with you. I don't I think whatever your time frame is, whatever your attention span is, like that should be the version you go with. I do think one of the later movies, which we'll talk about, I think the extended edition is far superior, but this one I think it could
Okay.
go either way. I really do think this one, the theatrical cut, because this is gonna be my first time watching these theatrical cuts because I started with the extended and that's just always been how I've rolled. Like this is going to be fun to see the theatrical cuts because these are the ones that get nominated. The ones that got nominated were the theatrical cuts. Like this is what the Academy based their judgment on, and I think this was a very just super well crafted film through and through. What's
Um,
up, Chad?
I totally agree with you. I just wanted to add, I found out something about Denis Villeneuve, who Dune felt a lot like Lord of the Rings, but Denis
Mm,
Villeneuve had a thought because people were wondering if there was like a 4-hour cut of Blade Runner 2049, and which we won't talk about on here, sadly, because that movie's a masterpiece. But they were like wondering, are you going to bring back some of the things you cut from that movie? And he's like, no, when I cut something, it's on the floor. Like that's it. And he says he doesn't really believe in director's cuts. He
mm.
said, in his opinion, which I know is going to be a hot take, controversial, but he is Denis Villeneuve. So how can you argue with Denis, right? But that dude said the only movies that he thinks the director's cut is better than the original cut are Blade Runner and Touch of Evil. Those are the only
Wow.
two.
Okay.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow, all right.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because usually director's cuts will be after the theatrical is released. The director can say, "But this is how I would have done it." And I think it's interesting because I think in this sense, they, I don't think the extendeds were made as a result of the theatrical. I don't think they went back and added stuff. I think it was just like this is what they wanted to make, and then they had to trim it down. And this was the
Right.
original, was the extended, and this is what the theatrical. Like I don't think it
Because
was
people,
after the theatrical he goes, "Well, let's add these scenes back." It
mhm.
was more of the theatrical. Let's take these scenes out,
Yeah, because people
which is
aren't going to
interesting.
go
Yeah.
see like 4-hour movies generally. Like, I think if you do it, add an intermission. But you have like James Cameron now, who's coming out with Avatar 2. Maybe we'll talk about it. That's
Maybe
next. I guess we might have.
it would be
Wait.
April. Yeah, April.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. April. So maybe we'll talk about it next year. We'll see. But
Yeah.
he was sitting there talking about like people who are complaining about Avatar 2 being like 3 hours, and he's like, well, you binge watch stuff on Netflix. You can watch this. I'm like,
You
well,
could
it's
take
like
breaks. You
you
could
could take
pause.
breaks. Exactly. He's
Yeah.
like, you don't be afraid to go pee. And
Mm,
I'm like, but then you're gonna miss something. If you're so like concerned about it, add an intermission or something. Why don't we bring that
yeah.
back for like 3+ hour movies?
Why not? Speaking of just long runtime, here's the long list of nominations Lord of the Rings got. It won 4 awards, but it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Peter Jackson, Best Supporting Actor for Ian McKellen, the only acting nominee of the group. But it makes sense. It's kind of like following the Obi-Wan thing of like, you're nominating the veteran actor of this group. But I do think there are some other great performances in there as well. Adapted screenplay, original song May It Be, the song that plays in the credits. Best sound, best art direction, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, and then these are the four it wins. It wins Best Original Score for Howard Shore. It wins Best Cinematography. It wins Best Makeup and wins Best Visual Effects. So,
Hell yeah.
very good lineup of movies there. That Balrog scene, just so many dark colors of black and orange and red. And speaking of red, let's talk a little bit more about the color red. Let's talk about Rouge, shall we? Let's talk about the Moulin Rouge. Chad, take us
I didn't even
away.
know that
Tell us
was
about
that meant red. Okay.
yeah,
Moulin
Rouge is
Rouge
red. I believe I might be wrong. Hold on.
in French.
I need to check.
You can just tell us later. Moulin Rouge, directed by Baz Luhrmann. Baz Luhrmann, written by Baz
Yeah.
Luhrmann and Craig Pierce. Cinematography by Donald M. McAlpine. Music by Craig Armstrong. We got Elvis by Baz, and I still need to see that. I'm excited.
Yes. I will tell you right now, Moulin Rouge does translate to red mill. So Moulin is a
Oh,
mill, a red is rouge. It makes sense because
okay.
that's the big visual is the red mill.
Yeah,
Which I never put two and two together, but that's it. That's what it
not me
literally
neither.
translates to.
Sweet. Starring Nicole Kidman, Ewan McGregor, Jim Broadbent, Richard Roxburgh, John Leguizamo, Jacek Corman, Caroline O'Connor, and Carrie Walker. Synopsis. A performer at the Moulin Rouge is dying of tuberculosis, or she has consumption, as they say in the movie, and attempts to save the Moulin Rouge while also falling in love.
Yes. Baz Luhrmann has such a unique style. This is the third. It's actually funny. We're talking about two big trilogies here: Lord of the Rings trilogy and then the Red Curtain trilogy. This is the third film of Baz Luhrmann's Red Curtain
Oh,
trilogy, following Strictly Ballroom and Romeo plus Juliet. It is one of those thematic trilogies rather
ah,
than story trilogies. Like it
the
doesn't.
Cornetto
These stories,
trilogy. Yeah.
yeah, they're very thematically similar. It's part of his Red Curtain trilogy. Everything is very in your face and very loud in terms of visuals, like very visually loud, like and very audibly loud, like very in your
Oh
face
yeah.
cinema, colors and just cut and editing and all over the place. It's all over the place. It's
Jesus
unhinged. It's
Christ.
Baz
Yeah.
Luhrmann through and through. And it's interesting because I think the first time I ate all that shit up, I was like, "Ooh, yum yum yum!" Like I love all the colors and the dazzling effects and the spectacle. But I'm interested to see what you think because we both watched this for the first time together on a stream with a bunch of other friends.
Mhm.
And I was blown away by the spectacle of it. But then this time I was able to more focus on the story and the writing and the characters and the performances. And I might have a different take than I did before. But I'd like to hear your side because I know this is your second watch. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on Moulin Rouge.
Interesting. Yes. Well, I will say first off, this is the one I took like the most notes for. Like
Okay.
when I was like doing picture this, I got a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
So I took a lot of notes. I'll like kind of maybe go through over those in a second. But yeah, we watched this with some friends on a stream, doing a virtual watch along. It was fun, but I feel like that also for me, I think just in general, that is not a way for me
To watch a movie.
to
Yeah.
watch a movie for the first
For the first
time.
time. Yeah.
Rewatch, sure. Whatever. Drink, watch movie, tight to friends. But for the first time, like, I really did not like this movie like at all. I was like, because okay, let me say, because this movie has a lot of crazy shit in there. It's almost like Boz just took a huge bump of cocaine and then made a musical.
He probably
Um,
did.
that's what it feels like. So, but anyways, all of the crazy elements in this movie, the crazy characters, the eccentric characters, the visuals, the filmmaking style, it's really overwhelming. And I feel like, I hyper focused on all the weird stuff first
Mhm.
on my first watch because I couldn't really get into the vibe of the actual movie and the love story that unfolds, the actual music. I also had another experience just hearing about this back in high school when I was in I was in drama club in high school, and
Mhm.
I remember people were listening to the Moulin Rouge soundtrack, and I was a big like Elton John fan and stuff like that. So I remember people like listening to the song that was "Your Song" is one of the big songs that's kind of like adapted
Yeah.
for this. And I remember people going, and I was like, well, that's not better than Elton John because I was like a dumb little kid. And they're like, yeah, it is. So I had a very weird, irrational hatred
Mm.
for Moulin Rouge for a long time
And
because
I
of
don't blame
that.
you because Elton John's version, don't get me wrong, is far superior. And I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
saying that these arrangements are bad. Some of these arrangements go hard. Like the Tango Roxanne is really epic. Like
Oh,
I love
yeah.
the original song in this. Like some of the arrangements are really really cool, but let's not say that they're much better than the originals because the
Yeah.
originals, I mean, there's a reason that this movie is using that music in that way because it's supposed to be like he's writing the greatest songs of centuries to come. And that's the thing
Right.
is like they are used because they are the best songs of all time, not because it's just like, oh, let's just use this pop song and this pop song. Like they're purposefully chosen because they're great songs. That doesn't mean that these versions are better though. Like it's honestly like the whole movie in my head is like paying homage to those songs rather than trying to make them better. And
Yes.
for anyone
Agree.
to say that these versions are better, I disagree. But
Yeah.
hey,
Same, yeah. So that's kind of like what led me into this movie. So I think that colored my first viewing. However, this one, I'm like, for picture this. This is nominated for Best
I
Picture. I got to treat it like everything else.
was gonna say you were rouge with anger.
Right. So going into this, I was like, look, I want to like this movie. A lot of people do. I want to see if I do. I know Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus is like, this is a love it or hate it experience. And I was like, that feels right, actually. But watching this movie, I know my wife really loves this movie. She would probably put it as her number one, even though
cool.
she also loves Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong, she does, but she's like, this is a personal like love, like, you know, I'd love this for a long time thing. And I have another thing too. I want to say, because this movie has a tragic ending. This isn't a spoiler, but Dylan was watching Buffy with all of us, and there's a part in Buffy, like in the 7th season, where she's talking to someone, and the person says, "I love how you pause the movie at chapter 32, the DVD at chapter 32, just so it has a happy ending." And yeah, so I just thought that was a really funny thing. And I know you love Willow as well. So, anyways, going off of that.
Yes.
Going off of that, I really enjoyed Moulin Rouge a lot more. I will say there's parts that are really, really, really weird I could do without, but I love like the love story that happens in it. In particular, Ewan McGregor in this, and Nicole Kidman as well.
Yeah.
I just think it's
both
so
very dreamy.
yeah, I just think it's such a good like story. There's so many parts that hadn't had me and Carrie, even though she's seen it before. We were like during it, like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And, I will say that I love that aspect so much that it makes me want to rewatch this movie more now, because I actually could hone in on the things that I like and deal with the things that I don't love. And the things that I don't love, even though I think sometimes his character is important to the story and does some good things, I do not love that John Leguizamo was popular around this time, because that dude,
he's so bad in this. And I respect him. He spoke at the graduation commencement at my school. Like, love John Leguizamo. Not mine, because I didn't have a graduation because COVID, but the year before he spoke, so I got to see him speak. Great guy, but God, he is awful at this. He's so bad in this. I'm sorry.
And that's kind of the cocaine part of Boz's direction there, I think, and choice of casting, I guess, or
because you have Jim Broadbent. Jim Broadbent's doing a similar thing, but he's doing it well. You know, like he's actually eating it up. He knows what type of movie he's in. I think John Leguizamo does too, but there's just something about Jim's that's a little bit better and more appealing. And yeah, I don't know.
I agree with that. I also thought Jim Broadbent was like a really weird, like some of the faces he makes. I'm like, oh my God. You calm the fuck down, Jim? Jesus.
Well, I think that's this whole movie, though. This movie doesn't know how to calm the fuck down. And I think, honestly, because I watched this again and I didn't like it as much, because I think the first time the spectacle was what I was clinging on to. I wasn't looking at like some of the actual like ins and outs. I really think the editing is awful in this. I think that the chopping back and forth is dizzying. I honestly think with such spectacle, the design is so good that I don't think you need the editing to detract from the design. And I think that's just a Baz Luhrmann problem in general. I think that's just kind of his style. I think he does it a lot better in Great Gatsby, slightly better in Elvis, but I think here it's very distracting. I don't know if I've ever gone on record in this channel but saying, but Romeo plus Juliet's one of my least favorite films ever, because I love that source material so much, and I think what he does with that, I just think he overdoes it and just kind of honestly ruins that source material for me. I think this is a much better film than that. I still find enjoyment of this because I like some of the musical arrangements. I think, like you said, the romance is very sweet, but I don't necessarily think the writing itself is very good. Like, I think some of the dialogue it's not the best story. I think the story's a little thin. I think this is one of those movies where you go into it for the spectacle, for the overall feeling of romance and the overwhelming love that's just portrayed by the leads, not necessarily the actual writing of the script and the story, because I think the story itself, it isn't something that I'm overall that impressed by, but I think I do still love a lot of the design, the costumes and art direction. Those are the 2 awards it wins, are so amazing. Like that Red Mill itself, like the Moulin Rouge itself, all the spectacle of that theater, it's gorgeous. And I just wish it was a little bit more controlled, because I think so much of it is already so unhinged that I don't think you need that extra layer of just all the cinematography and editing going all over the place. And I think for me, when I was able to focus in on those elements more, detracted for me. But I still kind of like this. It's almost like a guilty pleasure where like it kind of annoys the crap out of me at times, but I still find myself enjoying watching it. It's really interesting. Like I don't think I've ever seen a movie like that. You know,
that's actually like probably the description of the movie that when you said that, I went, oh my God, that's exactly it. Like it annoys me a lot, but I kind of really enjoy watching it. In a way, I really think without Ewan McGregor in this movie is not good. I think
Oh, okay, yeah. He carries a lot of it.
he makes the movie. Nicole Kidman to a little bit of a lesser extent, honestly, but I
Yeah.
think he's acting in a different movie. But
Yeah.
you know, he
I'll also
elevates
say,
this for sure.
yeah, on in line with the cast, Richard Roxburgh, and I think for those of you listening who are Schmodown fans, I like to believe that the Zaflirtenflaus was based solely off of Richard Roxburgh's character in this, because
Mhm.
they could not be any more similar in the way they speak. It's just the way they speak, yeah. It's very very similar.
He was very silly in the movie. I thought it was
Hmm.
funny, but there were certain times, like especially when they have the whole Madonna like a virgin thing. I'm like, this thing's fucking like hashtag me too is one of the notes that I wrote. Like, oh my god,
Yeah,
like they're both
it's
talking about like kind of like not like raping Satine, but like talking about taking
it's rough.
advantage of her as a virgin. I'm like, Jesus, this
Yeah,
is
like you watching, you're like, that just happened. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Next.
Exactly.
This whole movie is that. Like, I think you honestly need to be not sober, but like it helps if you're not sober watching this, because I think that's kind of the prime way to watch this, is when you can just
Yeah.
kind of like let it just wash over you.
Yeah, let
You know what
me
I mean?
touch on because you touched
Yeah.
on the effects, the editing, like you said. There is so much like quick stuff happening. I'm like, you don't need to do all that. But then
Right.
also, I think the worst thing about the actual filmmaking aspect is all of the, and this happened in like Peter Jackson's King Kong, and
Mm,
I think it did happen a little bit in Lord of the Rings as well. But it happened so much in Moulin Rouge that it's like the slow motion effects that they use in this.
mm.
Uh, Weird. The me and like Carrie, like the wife, she loves this movie, but even she was like, I can't like look during those parts. Like they're just so cheesy and cringe. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this movie would probably be a lot shorter if like you didn't do that effect.
Right.
It's happened
Yeah.
so many times in this movie, and it's like not really needed. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
but yeah, I will say I love the Roxanne moment that
The
happens because
tango.
it's
Yeah.
building up, and then I'm like, all that build up for him just to go Roxanne, and the way his voice is, it makes me think of Tom Waits doing a Roxanne song, and I think that's
Yeah.
addition. I think that's really cool. I love the scenery in this movie where like the one that really got me was cracking me up was when they were doing their big kind of like introduction like love song, and you had the moon singing in the background.
Yes.
It's just like little things like that that's just like, oh my god, this movie is
Yeah.
insane, but it's like
Yeah.
fun to watch
And it's like
almost.
operatic too. It's like the I'm like, whoa,
Yeah,
the moon is getting in on this action.
it's like a Lady
Um,
in the Tramp moment or
yeah.
something like that, I
And I'll
guess,
just
right?
say right now, The Greatest Showman totally ripped off that rooftop scene where they're
I
dancing
still
in the
need to see that
moonlight.
movie.
Oh, maybe
Oh,
you
okay.
don't. I don't know. You might like it. No, it's another one where it's like very in your face, over the top. I don't think it's as memorable as this in terms of like the stylistic choices, but maybe it's in a similar vein. So maybe
Yeah.
you would like it. I don't know.
If you don't
Any last
mind,
thoughts?
yeah, if you don't mind, let me go over my little bullet points real quick.
Yeah,
It's not
please
much.
do. I'd love to hear them. Yeah, yeah.
Um, the one moment, because I love, like I said, I love the romance between Christian and Satine in this movie. When the Duke is trying to criticize the play and say it shouldn't have that ending. She shouldn't end up with that guy. Who's that guy? She wants to be secure. She wants to have money and stuff like that. And then when Ewan goes, because she doesn't love you, and everyone's like, oh my god. Like me and Carrie were like, oh my god. Like we were like,
Yeah.
like I put little like shocked face emojis next to it, and then I said overuse of slow motion effects. Boz took cocaine and made a movie. I'm not sure if this movie is brilliant or bad, but I think it's a little of both. John Leguizamo in a movie shouldn't be nominated for Best Picture. Ewan makes this movie. Hashtag me too. Christian was almost killed by a Bond villain. And then the Buffy thing that I told you about.
Love that. Yeah, Moulin Rouge, nominated for 8 awards: Best Picture, Actress for Nicole Kidman, Sound, Cinematography, Makeup, and Film Editing. It is the winner of 2, though. It is Art Direction and Costume Design, as I mentioned. Very worthy wins there for Art Direction and Costume Design. The sets, the costumes, they are great. Notably snubbed, though, Ewan McGregor, oddly enough. But Now we have to get to ranking these movies. I'm very interested to see how we're gonna rank these
Oh
because
yeah.
I've already spoiled my top two, but I'm interested to see where we're gonna land on the rest. So with
All
number
right.
5, I think it should be no surprise for me. I put A Beautiful Mind at number 5. Just wasn't vibing with it. Chad, what is your number 5?
Gosford Park is my number 5.
All right, my number 4 is Moulin Rouge.
My number 4 is A Beautiful Mind.
All right, my number 3 is Gosford Park.
My number 3 is Moulin Rouge.
All right, so we got the same top two.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Here's where I have to think. I okay. I gotta because there's one that just is a part of me and one that I just discovered for the first time. I can't do it. I'm not gonna put it at number 1, but a very close number 2 for me is In the Bedroom. What is your number 2?
I'm also going to put In the Bedroom at number 2.
Which means we have the same number 1, which is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. It was Chad's number 1. It's my number 1. A very close number 2 In the Bedroom, though. But like those, this whole crop of movies is very interesting to talk about. They're all so different. All 5 of these movies could not be any more different, which I think is the most interesting thing about this year in general. Transitioning to our Best Actor and Best Actress, what Chad and I do is we take a Best Actor, Best Actress from these 5 films only. So Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, unfortunately, they are ineligible, even though they gave great performances. So are the performances from Mulholland Drive and all those great films that we mentioned earlier. But from these 5 films, they do not have to be nominated for Oscars. So even though there was one Lord of the Rings actor nominated, it doesn't mean that we have to go with that person or go with any of the nominees. But I have Best Actor first, and I will start with one of the nominees. And this is where I'm going to give my love to In the Bedroom because Tom Wilkinson is my Best Actor for 2001. I think he is so good. I think he is just incredible. That third act is really where he started to get me because the second act, he's kind of the more like not laid back, but he's the less showy of the performances. He's the more like kind of reserved one. But in that fight with Sissy Spacek in the kitchen, in the moments where he's going to like see Marissa Tomei, he's a little bit more reserved. But at the end, we kind of see him kind of like evolve into this whole other beast. And then at the end, kind of seeing him just sulk back to that like kind of frigid, lifeless nature. I love it, and I think he is exceptional in this movie. So he is my Best Actor.
I know what you think, that I was too lenient, that I let him get away with
everything.
Yes. And why? Why did he never come to you?
Yeah, like you. So I just want to touch on what you said because I love Tom Wilkinson. I said I found that I love him so much. I was thinking about nominating him. I'm so glad that you did. And the way you were talking, I thought maybe you might go Sean Astin, but then I was thinking about maybe going Sean Astin too because he's so great in that role. But I'm like, we got 2 other chances to maybe do that, and we'll see if it happens.
Right, and that's
but
another thing too is we have the franchise in mind, so I have some ideas for later months as well. I'm on the
absolutely, yeah. So I'm not going to do Sean Astin, even though I love him in that movie so much. I'm going to go with the one that surprised me the most, Ewan McGregor, Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, I figured you were going to go there too. Yeah, when you were talking about him. Yeah, tell me. Yeah,
I was talking with the wife, and I was like, look. Sean Astin is great in Lord of the Rings. I really want to pick him, but then I'm like, we have 2 other months to do that, maybe. He's in an ensemble, and everyone's doing a really great job in that movie, not just him, but Ewan makes this movie, I think. Even the wife said, she was like, Chad, the only reason why I really love this movie is because it's a lot of crazy shit, and then everything stops when Ewan just starts belting these beautiful, songs. He's actually singing. This dude knows how to sing. He's doing a great job. He makes the movie just by singing. And just the look, this whole movie that he has on his face just really works for me as far as him being a man in love. And I feel like he just like had that like look on his face that just really sold that for me, that he was in love. He would do anything. Even like let her, have sex with someone else, even though like he goes back on it later and stuff like that. He just feels so distraught about that, like how probably anybody would, but just like all these like complex emotions that he's having. And then when he has to like, leave the show and then turn around and, do his song. And it's just, he's crushing it in that movie at like 30 years old. I'm like, he's younger than I am now. He was then. Yeah. And, I'm like, he's doing such a great job. And it really just kind of like reframed Ewan McGregor for me, I think, as an actor as a whole, because, I didn't love Ewan McGregor before, and now I'm starting to like watching him in
Yeah.
this movie. So
Yeah,
adore
Obi-Wan can
Ewan
sing.
McGregor in this movie.
How wonderful life is. Now you're in the world.
Tell us, Chad, who is your best actress since you have best actress first this month?
Well, I'm gonna go with another movie that we both really, really, really love. I wanted to go Marissa Tomei because you know, I love her so much, but I feel like she wasn't the best. We didn't get a ton from her in the movie to really help me do that. But I went Sissy Spacek in the bedroom.
All right.
The reason being is just because I think she really crushed it. I mean, I got to say, we've had years where there's not a lot of actresses in movies, so we got to like kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel. Like, who could we do? Like, you know, the
Yeah,
mother from
1975.
Jaws.
1975.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a tough
exactly.
one because it was Nurse Ratched and then some girls from Nashville
Right.
and Lee Fierro as Mrs. Well, what's her name? Jeez, Mrs.
Oh, I can't remember either.
Oh, wait,
But
I gotta think of it. You keep going.
it's
I'm
one
gonna
of your
think of it.
favorite movies. You have to. Anyways, yeah, Sissy Spacek, I think just really crushes it in this. I think
I'll
she
look it
just
up.
plays the, you know, the mother who's concerned about her son dating an older woman lady, and
Miss
you know, he's
Kintner.
talking to him.
Damn it,
There you go, Kittner or Kitchener, Kittner.
Kitchener. I don't know.
And then you know, later just how she does the grief, that whole scene between Tom Wilkinson and Sissy Spacek, it just reminded me so much of Adam Driver and
Scarlett
ScarJo
Johansson. Yeah, yeah.
and Marriage Story. And I was like, this is Marriage Story, but just way earlier.
You wanted it and you couldn't get it. That's why you didn't stop him. So you could get your kicks or your son. You can't admit the truth to me or to yourself that Frank died for your fantasy piece of ass!
Amazing.
Such a great actress in general. You know, of course she's Carrie, and of course she was in The Coal Miner's Daughter, but like also like in like Badlands. Help me out. Terrence Malick's Badlands. She's so good in that as well. So I love Sissy Spacek.
I was gonna say she joins the club of 2 wins on Picture This because Dan Skip Allen picked her for Coal Miner's Daughter, so she has her second win here. Ewan and Tom, it's their first, and I'm gonna give the first and probably only because, like I said, she's not in a lot of these movies. She was my pick, and you mentioned her. I'm going Marissa Tomei. I'm gonna give her the win here because while you said she's not in a ton of it, the stuff she's in though. Like she's that first half of the movie. Like you have to fall in love with her so you can realize how painful it is to see what the person who, I mean, it's hard to talk about this without spoiling, but like the person who dies, you have to establish that connection because you need to know what he died for and why he died the way he did and what he was fighting to protect. And it also makes it so much harder in that second half because she's not in it a ton, but you understand why she's not. And that moment at the courthouse is just some of the best acting I've ever seen her do.
Yeah.
We can't give it to her for Cousin Vinny because it wasn't nominated. We can't give it to her for The Wrestler because it wasn't nominated. So I think this is my way of honoring her as one of my favorite actresses
So
and
glad
just
you
this
did.
performance because it is such a good performance. Sissy Spacek was my backup, so I'm glad we're simpatico.
Yeah. I was
Marissa
so
Tomei,
wanting
to
do. I was just so wanting to do Marissa Tomei, so I'm so glad you did. And even we get one of like the best scenes of the movie, I think, between them when she goes to apologize, just grief stricken, she gets slapped right in the face.
Yeah,
and you're like,
damn.
damn.
That's the last thing you see of her too. Like that's it. And I think that's so powerful too. And she leaves a lasting impression. You think of some performances, some of the best of all time. You know, maybe you don't agree, but Anne Hathaway in Les Mis and Mahershala Ali in Moonlight, these performances. But like what I'm saying is like these performances that end after like 20, 30 minutes, but then have a long lasting impact throughout the rest. I had that feeling with her here. Like her first half stuff carried through the second half and made it even more heartbreaking. So I'm going Marissa Tomei.
I got to the stairs. And then I heard the shot.
Great lineup here. We have as our best actor, I have Tom Wilkinson. Chad has Ewan McGregor from Moulin Rouge. And best actress, also from In the Bedroom, Chad has Sissy Spacek, and I have Marissa Tomei. And our best picture, of course, for 2001 is Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. What a lineup. What an amazing lineup. We didn't give any love in our performances for Gosford Park or A Beautiful Mind, but I think there are also some great performances in those. A really great slate of 5 films, and we're continuing our series next month with 2002. We're continuing along the Lord of the Rings train. Like Chad said, it may not be our number one, especially because this next year, I already know there are some heavy hitters amongst them. So the nominees for 2002 that we will be covering, the winner of that year, Chicago, the movie musical, the Martin Scorsese film Gangs of New York, the Nicole Kidman Oscar-winning film The Hours, the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and the Roman Polanski film The Pianist. So 5 really interesting films to talk about. Again, so different. These films could not be any more different in this slate. I feel the same way about the 2002 slate. Chad, any thoughts before you head into that slate? I have seen all of these movies. This is one of those rare cases where I have seen all of them. How many of those have you seen?
What was the last one you said?
The Pianist.
Yes. Okay. So I've only seen 2 of these. I saw, wait.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw Chicago and I saw Lord of the Rings.
Cool.
The other 3 I haven't seen, so I'm very excited to fill in those gaps, especially Gangs of New York. Like, so many people talk about that one, and I've heard so much about it. I've just been meaning to watch it for a very long time. I never got around to it. And so I'm very excited about that. The other thing is I meant to mention this earlier, but you mentioned Romeo plus Juliet that you really don't like at all. Radiohead wrote a song for that, and it ended up in their album OK Computer, which is one of the greatest songs ever made. So at least it brought something great to the world.
Yes, and hey, that's the least involvement Baz Luhrmann had in that movie, so I'm gonna give that credit to them. Radiohead.
And they also wrote the theme song for Spectre that never made it in the movie.
That's right.
And
that's right.
How dare you?
Is it good? Have you heard the song? Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's
okay,
way
so
better
they
than
did
the Sam
release it.
Smith
That's good.
one.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. Anyway, sorry for that has nothing to do with this, but.
Chad, tell us. Keep going. Where can they find you? Where can they find you if they want to seek out anything else of yours?
Yep, find me here. I do draft day, Dylan's draft day sometimes. I don't know if you've teased it, but we're doing like trilogies this month.
We're doing trilogies this month. Yeah, which is going to be interesting because 2 of these movies are part of trilogies. So we'll see if the Red Curtain or the Lord of the Rings trilogies make that draft day. I have a feeling on a board of 25, one of them will. And spoiler alert, it's not the Moulin Rouge one. It might. Who knows? I won't pick anything that Romeo plus Juliet is a part of, but hey, maybe someone else will. Who knows?
But yeah, so I know some people do like that movie, but anyways, you can find me those 2. You can find me sometimes I do the Dylan's Marvelous Movie Mondays MCU trivia stuff. Sometimes is really fun. And then also I do my own channel where I rank things. Dylan's on that sometimes. We're doing the MCU rankings. We're going to do phase 3 at some point soon. I hope very soon, because that's usually fun when we do that. Maybe Dylan will be on that. I'm not sure. Star Wars, we're looking into doing. We're looking into doing Denis because that's long waited. We've been meaning to do that for a long time. Yeah, but also, we did Christmas, we did Harry Potter, we did a lot of other. Edgar Wright was our first one actually, and it was just really fun. Just something we did for fun. I'm on Movie Battleground. This I don't know if. I'll spoil it. I don't care, whoever watches this, but I just won against my opponent, Sean Hunter. And so I have a really good record. I'm very excited. I'm going up for a championship level match over in the Movie Battlegrounds over at TMG. Awesome. It's a fun debate thing that I do, and I'm decent at it, so I like to do it. It's really fun. Go check that channel out if you're interested in movie debate, because it's really fun to hear people's opinions on things, and just people fighting about it. And it's more fun than it is angry a lot of the time. So I'll say that. But I do a lot of trivia. In fact, Dylan and I are doing more trivia. We've done trivia in the past, but we're doing more trivia together as Picture This. And my friend Henry Sanchez's, or Henry Confidential as he goes by, channel, There Will Be Trivia. We're doing a teams match soon, and we're going to have a really good time. Any thoughts on that, Dylan?
Yeah. No, I'm just. Will said that if I'm nearly as hungry as you, then we're in for a good match. Well, Chad, you are hungry. I am famished. I am starving. I'm excited to get in the ring. Maybe by the time this is airing, that will have already aired. Maybe not. We'll have definitely competed by the time this is airing. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And we have another tournament that we might be a part of later as well. So interesting stuff on the horizon for trivia, especially with, sadly, the Schmodown coming to an end. There's got to be more trivia out there, and we've got to fill that void. So
never die.
I'm hungry. I'm famished. Give me a bib and a fork and a knife, and let's go.
Nice. One more thing I wanted to add. I also do, in fact, I'm about to go do that very soon. Another episode of a show that I do with my buddy Hunter Chambliss and my wife Carrie Webb. It's called Welcome to Primetime, a very fun Nightmare on Elm Street quote that we named for our show. It's a horror show. It's not really a podcast yet or anything. I don't know if I have plans to do that, but every week, every Sunday, I think this is released most of the times. We just talk about horror stuff in general, news, franchises, just singular movies, just horror, true crime and horror concepts, and just anything really. We just recently did Midnight Mass, which is a super undervalued show, underseen show that a lot more people should see because Mike Flanagan is a genius. We did the Fear Street trilogy, and this week we're doing Urban Legend, a 1998 movie that came out. It has Jared Leto in it. Still watch the movie, even if you don't like Jared Leto. He was very young then.
It's Morbid time.
Very, very Scream, Kevin Williamson-esque, not as good, but vibe. And we're talking about actual urban legends that are out there and stuff like that. Anyways, we have a good time. And as always, thank you, Dill. This is a very fun year to cover.
Yeah, it was very, very fun, and we're looking forward for 2002. All my stuff and socials are down there. You can find me mostly here, though, at the Dill Pick'em Movie Network. Got great shows coming up. We're doing Troll 2 on Framerec. We're talking about the end. We just talked about the end of Miss Marvel with Kelsey, and we got some trivia coming up, including a triple threat with Chad and his wife and his buddy Noah, and a match with me and Matt, so who's my co-host on Framerec. And we're in the midst of Big Brother season, Bachelorette season for Recipe for Reality. Got some great stuff happening all over the place. Draft Day, as we said, is trilogy, so that'll be coming out soon. This will be out before all that, but I'm very excited for you all to see that. So thank you guys so much for watching. That was 2001. We're looking forward for 2002 and 2003, and then moving on to some other cool years. See you guys next time.